Welcome back. Tonight we're going to be rebuilding an Amal 930 carburetor. This carburetor was found on my this carburetor is what came original in my 1968 Triumph Trophy. I was able to rebuild this carburetor without spending any money. So I want to share with you everything that I did, including taking it apart, cleaning it, repairing it, putting it back together. And hopefully this can help you if you're dealing with the same issues that I was doing. A little backstory, I had an aftermarket carburetor on the bike. It's a pretty well-known Japanese carburetor. It worked fine, but if you've ever had a classic Triumph, it's just not the same as the original carburetors that came on it. And the original carburetor was actually given to me in a box, and I really wanted to use it. And I was thinking about I was thinking about buying a rebuild kit for it, but I really wanted to take the same process you would as like if you're rebuilding a motor. So I went through every piece, cleaned it, inspected it, tried to remove any grooves, so on and so forth. I'm gonna go through all this with you in detail in just a second, but I was able to get it to work and work really well. And again, I didn't spend any money. So I wanna share with you everything that I did and go from there. During this process, if you find that any of the pieces that I'm gonna be pointing out are in really bad shape, I'll show you where you can purchase them. They'll have to be purchased online, but they're very inexpensive. But again, hopefully if you are able to, like I was, you might be able to do this without spending a dime. So first thing I'm gonna do is show you how to take it apart. We're gonna do that right now. Now removing the carburetor is quite simple, and I'm gonna show you the process you're gonna take. Process one, make sure your fuel's off. Then put a small bowl on your top of your motor right here, and you're going to go ahead and disconnect this fuel line and disconnect that fuel line and just allow what fuel's left in them to drain. Then you're going to slowly release this bolt right here that I'm touching, and that's going to allow all the fuel in the float to go ahead and drain, and that way you're not getting fuel everywhere when you're taking this off. Once that's done, you're going to remove this screw here, and you're going to remove the same screw on the other side. That's going to allow the carburetor, after a few wiggles, to come off directly. Once that's completed, you're going to remove this screw and you're going to remove this screw. Now at this time the carburetor is going to be sitting like right here, and that's going to allow you to take this off, which I'm going to show you how to do in just a second. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect this. I've already done it, so it's going to be very simple, and I'm going to show you how to take that top piece off. That's your throttle cable. I'll be right back. Alright, I'm trying to position the camera so I can show you what I'm doing here in case you've never done this before. But like I said a second ago, you're going to go ahead and drill. I'm sorry. I thought I got all the fuel out. Go figure. You're going to go ahead and remove these two screws here. So I'm going to do that real quick while I let the gas drip out. Maybe should have shaken that up a little bit more. As you can see, I had my tray prepared. I also, when I put this new carburetor on, I bought a new throttle cable from Lowbrow Customs. I only paid I think it was under 12 bucks for it, and it works fantastic. But I had to drill out the top of this case, and finding out that a lot of people did that. So you're going to go ahead and pull your slide out like this here. And you're going to go ahead and pull this, let's get this out of the way. You're going to go ahead and pull this spring up. What you want to try to do is get it in between your two fingers here. It's a pain in the butt. And this is your needle. Go ahead and remove that. We'll talk about placement of the needle in just a second. But go ahead and remove that. And you're going to push this forward like that, and then push it over so it comes out. And this and all of this can stay just like this. Go ahead and just set this in here. You won't be needing anything more with that. And from here, we are going to need this. We're going to need this. And we're going to need this, which I'm going to go over how we're going to break this apart in just a second. Now here are the things that you're going to need. You're going to need WD-40. You're going to need carb cleaner. You're going to need steel wool, and I'm using an extra fine steel wool. It's a buffing steel wool because we want to remove scratches, not create scratches. And you're going to need an air compressor and an air chuck. Now I know I said Brillo pads earlier. Please excuse that. It's steel wool pads because, again, we don't want anything too rough. But this is all you're going to need. Let's go from there. Alrighty, let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove, and I was able to do this with a 9/16. We're going to remove this bolt right here. And the reason why this is important is this not only was our drain to remove the fuel from the bowl, but this is also a filter. Now you'll see my filter's in pretty good shape. What you're going to want to do is take this carb cleaner and clean this filter really good. However, I've already done this quite a bit, so I'm not going to, you're going to see that I'm not going to do this again. Again, I've done this already to make sure that this worked and worked properly before I decided to share it with you. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't giving anyone bad advice. But you're going to remove this, clean this filter out, and go ahead and soak all of this really good. Again, you can't have too much carb cleaner right now. You want this stuff to be to move very easily and to be very clean. It's very important that all this is clean. So you want to clean all this out really well. I mean, really good. I'm just going to hit it again just before I put it back together. And then from there, we're going to go ahead and take the bowl apart. Now, I talked to you about some pieces that if you needed to order, where you could order them from. That filter's an important one. And luckily, the way they're made, they're pretty strong. So you should be able to clean yours. But if you find that yours is just in really bad shape, then at this point, I would recommend ordering Lowbrow Customs. You'll find that I like using them a lot just because their pricing's fantastic. Their service and staff is amazing. I also use TC Brothers because I've got an XS 650 chopper that I'm building that I'll be sharing with you. I'm going to start the teardown tomorrow. And I use TC Brothers for a lot of their parts. But TC Brothers, Lowbrow Customs, that's where I would start if you're going to need to start replacing these pieces. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure this bowl is really clean. The reason why this is so important is our fuel sits in here. What happens is when that fuel comes down from your gas tank into this here, okay? You had a fuel line coming in here, you had a fuel line coming into here, and it fills this bowl up. And it fills this bowl up until this raises. So I'll show you what I did here. It goes in here like this. Okay, you want to make sure this is operating properly. What happens is when the fuel comes in it, it'll fill it up to about here and then it'll stop. And that's how it knows that it's full. What you want to do is you want to spray and clean this bowl out really well. I also used, before I cleaned it, I did WD-40 and I cleaned the inside out with my pad. I mean, I cleaned it really good. And I would recommend doing the same thing. The second part that's very important is that this works properly. So most of the times, and I've worked on several of these carburetors, I find that these normally really aren't in bad shape. They do make replacements for them, but most of the times you're going to find that these are in really good shape. So I'm just going to put this in my bowl, clean it again. Now, you're going to want to clean that really well. And if you find any corrosion on, normally it's this piece here, it's a good idea to use that wool and clean this off really good and make sure this is really clean. But that is the second very important piece that needs to be functioning properly. I also went ahead and made sure I cleaned out. So the fuel that goes into that tiny hole there has no blockage. So you want to make sure all this is clean and cleaned very well. So there's nothing wrong with letting that carb cleaner just sit in here as long as it needs to. If you find that yours is very corroded, the WD-40 along with, it acts kind of like a wet sand. WD-40 and the pad do excellent work on these metals, cleaning them without causing any scratches. They actually remove some of the fine scratches, which is really important what we're going to be working with. So you want to make sure that is functioning properly and functioning well. And as we put it back together, I'll show you that. We're going to carefully remove our gasket here. Now, if your gasket is in pieces, you are going to want to replace this. Again, I find that a lot of these carbs that I'm working on, these gaskets seem to hold up pretty well. For whatever reason, this gasket is a 1968 gasket and is in excellent shape. So hopefully yours is as well, but again, you have to replace it. Then what you're going to do is you are going to remove this needle here. As you can see, that is where our needle went into. This is extremely important because obviously it's pulling fuel up through there. So what you're going to want to do is you can soak it, clean it, but again, I filled my tray with about 1 inch of that carb cleaner because I wanted to do a good job. And I removed this completely and soaked it in there and made sure it was extremely clean. You see how I'm blowing in this? I know this sounds dumb, but as I was cleaning it, the reason why I said you need your compressor, I was blowing air into this and making sure that it was functioning properly and had no blockage. That is extremely important. I also soaked like crazy, top and bottom. Okay, you can see the hole for it here. This is your bleeder, okay, or tickler as most people call it. This is what grabs fuel to go ahead and start the motorcycle. So you want to make sure that this is working really well. So I would just continually soak it, move it up and down, soak it, move it up and down. Just every part needs to be really clean. But this is an extremely important piece, okay? I don't remember the exact name for it, so if any of you are watching this and know the exact name for it, please share with that below. But what I can tell you from working on carburetors for a long time, this needs to function properly. So you want to go ahead and remove this. You want to clean it inside and out and make sure there's no blockage. You also want to make sure every nook and cranny is cleared. And the reason being is airflow and fuel is a mixture that is extremely important when these carburetors run. So all of this, I literally, with the WD-40, I would spray WD-40 around this and use my pad. And I made sure that it was nice and smooth. And I know this sounds silly, but it's important to make sure that this was functioning properly. And we cleaned it. I mean, you can see this works so well. And that's what made me realize that I could rebuild this carburetor. The issue this carb was having is that it was a blockage. It wasn't getting fuel properly. And I'll show you where I found that blockage. And my slide wasn't moving up and down freely. And so what I found is that it wasn't functioning because it had a lot of grooves in it. It was like stuck. It was stuck in here. It didn't want to go up and down. It wasn't working like it was supposed to. And then I decided to treat it like I would honing a motor. And so what I decided to do was I took this WD-40, which you'll see here, and my pad, and I started just 15-20 minutes, just like you would. You don't spend one place at one time, but just at a 45-degree angle. I know this looks funny, forgive me, but just cleaning any deep scratches out of this without taking additional mineral off. I'm literally just removing these fine scratches so this will move up and down freely. And then I spent, this thing was a mess, a good 30 minutes with this, just going through it and polishing it up and down, 45-degree angle, straight angle. Just the goal is to not be in one place at one time and spend a good amount of time with it, because the most important thing is that this is moving up and down properly, up and down freely. This is one of the main issues with these carburetors, is that these things get stuck. They have corrosion on them, a little bit of rust on them. They have scratches and grooves in them because once it gets a little bit of corrosion, it rubs against the walls. So take your time, take a lot of time, as much time as you need, and clean this, and thoroughly clean this. And you'll see, I mean, look how good this is coming out already. Just from the little bit that I'm doing, look at that. And this thing was scratched to all hell. So I want you to take your time right now. We'll get back into this video in a second. So I'm going to show you the next thing that I had to do. And I want you to go through. I'm going to do the same. And remove this. Soak this in carb cleaner. Okay? And then I want you to take your WD-40 and spray this whole carb. And I want you to clean these cylinder walls here. I want you to clean here. I want you to clean inside of here. And most importantly, I want you to really, just like I did here, look how clean that is. I want you to polish your sleeve. This is extremely important. So I want you to work on that, and then we will get back to the next part. Oh, sorry. We're going to get back in a second. Now, if you're like me, you're also going to want your carburetor to look good. So the other thing you're going to do is you're going to spray WD-40 all over the entire carb and start polishing the carburetor with your pad. And it really comes out nice. I also do all my gaskets, where the gasket's going to go to get rid of any small grooves. It's just, if your carb was leaking, it's just one of the things that's going to help you prevent that carburetor from leaking. But again, take your time, go through it. You're going to go ahead and polish everything. You can polish your needle. It's just going to help all of this work so much better. The final issue that I had with this carburetor, which I didn't realize, was my air fuel adjustment screw. And this is your idle screw here. This is your air fuel adjustment screw. And your air fuel adjustment screw allows fuel and air to come through this little hole right here. And when I was running this carburetor, that is the second issue. Once I got the slide to work properly, I was having issues getting the fuel and air mixture to work properly. So I'm going to grab my screwdriver and show you what I did there. Now, if you're like me, I don't know if your setting was good or not, but you want to remember what your old setting was. If you don't, I'll show you a good tip of the trade there. But for me, it was, yeah, see, mine was only out, geez, quarter of a turn. But I normally pull it out one whole turn when I'm starting the bike for the first time. And I'll give you some points and some tips on how to adjust that there once it's running. The idle screw is very easy to adjust when it's running. You can pretty much hear that. But you're going to pull that screw out. You're going to see this here, and you see I've already cleaned this, but you're going to make sure this is very clean. And then you're going to soak it with your carb cleaner inside that hole. But one of the things that's going to help you the most is fill this screw hole with that carb cleaner, okay? And what I did, I'm going to show you. Gross, but it works. What I did is I would fill this hole with carb cleaner, and then I would take my compressor and I would blow air through it to make sure there's a tiny little hole. I don't know if you can see it, but it's a tiny little hole right here where that gas is going to spray through. And that needs to work properly. And that was the biggest issue that I wasn't aware of with this car once I got the slide to work. And finally, I took this screw out and found that this hole was blocked off in here because this screw was really corroded. Because it doesn't get a whole lot of fuel going across it, so it's very easily to corrode because it just has this tiny little gasket on here that, as you can see, wears pretty easily. So you're going to go ahead and soak inside of here really well, as many times as you need to, and then blow air through it. And you're actually going to see the fuel shoot up when you do that. It won't be fuel, it'll be the carb cleaner, but you're going to want to make sure that works really well. Really well. You can see as I'm doing it, you can see that it's already starting to bleed because mine's already cleaned out really well. And you want to make sure yours is cleaned out really well. And then when you're done and everything's cleaned up, you're going to want to clean all the parts. You're going to get all that WD-40 off them. Look how clean and pretty that thing is already. I mean, it just comes out so well. But you're going to want to clean everything. Let it soak real good. Get all that WD-40 off of it. And then we're going to put the carb back together to test it. Now, I've been through this, so I know it works, and I know it works well. The slide is very important. It has to go up and down freely. This is extremely important. It needs to pull the fuel freely. And your air and fuel mixture is extremely important for it to run properly. So that needs to be pulling properly. So you want to make sure you spend as much time as you need making sure all three of those parts are extremely clean. Then when you put the carburetor back together, either use your old adjustment in that screw, or like I said, you're going to leave it out one full turn because it'll start, and then we can adjust from there. And then you're going to do your needle, which is important. If you're a stock build, most of us put the needle, if you can see this here, we put it in the center. Mine was an older carburetor, so I wanted more fuel, so I changed my direction. And I'll go over with you how I did that in just a second. But again, if you're stock build, you're going to want to just keep that in the middle. Now that all our parts are cleaned and polished, it's time to put the carburetor back together. One of the things I was going to tell you, and I knew that the picture wasn't coming out. There we go. Now you can see that needle setting. My setting is in the center. Oh, go back, go back. All right. The setting at the top, which they consider position number 1, is the weakest setting, which is the weakest mixture, which is the weakest fuel mixture and more air. The middle is, like I said, what is going to be recommended for your stock setting. And then your lowest, which is number 3, would be a more fuel, your richest mixture. The reason why I went with the richest mixture was before my carburetor was fixed properly. I was trying to get it to run because I wasn't getting enough fuel, and I was able to get it to kind of work before I figured the issue with the screw. Now I'm going to be putting back at that middle adjustment. You are going to have to go through this back and forth, but depending on, because the carburetor's older and because the slide is probably going to be a little worn, it's going to allow more air pass by than a stock slide would. So you may want a weaker mixture, or, well, that would make sense. So a weaker mixture versus your middle of the road mixture, or you may want a stronger mixture. You're going to have to make that adjustment call by yourself. Once the carburetor is put together, you're going to go ahead and make those adjustments. Your idle screw is going to be the easiest because you're going to be able to tell by ear, moving that idle screw up and down where your proper setting is going to be. I can also do a video later for you if you need. The air fuel mixture screw, which is the one that we took out here, you're going to pull that out one full turn. And then what you're going to do is you're going to move that back and forth. When the bike is warm and running, you're going to move that in and out to make its proper adjustment. And where you're going to get that proper adjustment is when the bike is running, right before it starts to run hard. So it's like going right when it gets to that point, when it starts to raise from going bum 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 to bum 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 bum, then you're going to come down just a quarter of a turn. And normally I find that is a really close setting. And once I get the bike put back together, I'll show you a video on that. The reason why I'm not going to be starting the motorcycle tonight is I took my exhaust off. I'm in the process of sanding down the original exhaust that was on it and repolishing that. Then I'll show you a video of it running. Since I've already rebuilt this carburetor and found that all of this worked, that's why I'm sharing this video. I actually made it for a friend of mine who's running through this issue right now. So we're going to go ahead and put the carburetor back. First thing we're going to do is we're going to put the float bowl back together. This here, and then you're going to be putting that needle adjustment. You're going to put this in with that needle adjustment screw. And then you're going to put the gasket on it. Again, make sure all this is cleaned out really well, like we talked about, all polished real nicely. And then you're going to put this back together. So there you go. That's how it's going to look. You're going to make sure that's moving properly. Put your gasket on it and go ahead and reconnect that. So that's the first thing you're going to do, putting this carburetor back together. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. Now that the bowl's on, you're going to go install your fuel inlet with the screen. And then once that's installed, you're going to go ahead and put your fuel adjustment screw back in. And we're going to go ahead and set that at one full turn out like we discussed. And from there, once that's installed, we're going to make sure our slide is moving up and down properly. Now, as you can see in my video, look how nicely that's moving up and down. You can see it drops with no issues, comes up, down. You just want to make sure all that's working properly. That is extremely important, and right now I am really happy. This looks fantastic. It's that simple, guys, to put this together. It's that easy. You just want to go through and make sure all these parts are polished, cleaned, and working properly. And if you're like me, I was able to rebuild this whole thing without spending a dime because I had all this stuff already. So now we're going to go ahead and set it and install it. Again, I can't run it for you tonight, but I'll do that in my next video. But if you've seen any of my videos in the past, she's running and running good. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to put it together. Most of it is quite simple except for getting the needle and the slide installed, which can be kind of a pain, but I want you to follow along if you haven't done it before. If you have done it before, then you know what I'm going through. You don't put the needle in first. What you need to do is you get your screw, okay? You want to make sure this is adjusted all the way out. And you're going to put it back in. It goes in this groove. You see that groove right there, inside of there? And you're going to do that 2-finger trick I showed you a minute ago. And then you're going to go ahead and then put it in like this here. So you see it hit. It can be kind of a pain. Once you get inside, like I said, not the easiest of processes. You might have to adjust your throttle a little bit more, but I've been able to do it without having to do that. Now you put it inside that hole there like I showed you, and then push it once it's up. Well, it's almost up. She wanted to embarrass me on YouTube. So you can see that we're all going through the same issue here. That finger placement's really important. I think I got it this time. There we go, I got it this time. Put it in. Come on, girl. 3 times the charm. In. Ah, so close. So close. Oh, that was easier. Oh, do it that way. Alright, but it's important that that comes up and then over so it locks in. Then you're going to have to pull this spring back up one more time. Now that it's locked in, you have to put your needle position in. There's your needle. And it literally sits inside a groove. Can't miss it. You're going to see it's pretty. Oh, well, don't do that. See, it sits in there just like that. The reason why I'm keeping this video on so you can see just how easy this is not. But it can be done. A little bit of patience. As you can see, we're only a minute in. Move that over. Slide your needle in, like I'm doing here. And then it sits in there nice and flush. Make sure your spring sits back on top of it because that's what's holding it together. And make sure it's inside the grooves here. And so far we are looking really good. And then you're going to go ahead and carefully align that groove with this groove right here. And make sure your needle goes inside this hole right here. Just like this here. Groove, needle, you might have to use your finger a little. Once you do, line it with your groove. Perfect. Now I'm going to go ahead and put it together now. It's going to be kind of hard, so I'm not going to bore you with those details, but I'm going to go ahead and put all that together and we'll go from there. Okay, so once that's in, moving freely, you're going to go ahead and put those 2 screws back on, but you also want to make sure that it's sitting all the way down. So you want to make sure your adjustment is good. You actually want on your throttle a little bit of space before it moves up and down. And right now I don't have that, so I want to make sure I did that properly, as I did before I started. The needle position's in the right spot. This is sitting all the way in like it's supposed to. Goes back in the groove like we discussed. In the hole like it's supposed to. Make sure it sits in there properly. There we go. There we go. Perfect. And I'll go through and make my proper adjustments, but see, before I have a little bit, I'm moving the throttle back and forth before it's not doing anything, and then, yeah, that's what you want to see right there. You can hear my throttle, I'm moving about 1/4 of an inch, and then it starts to go up. That's exactly what you want. You're going to put these 2 screws back on here. Now your throttle will have adjustments either at the throttle itself, or it'll have adjustments halfway through. But again, you want to make sure you got a little bit of space before. You don't want that thing even up just a little bit, or when you start the bike, it's going to sound like it's trying to take off. And then we're going to go ahead and put everything back together, but everything is functioning properly, moving up and down freely. Spring on it's good. That's a good sound right there. See, before I'm moving the throttle just a little bit, nothing's happening, and then after quarter turn starts to move up and down. That, ladies and gentlemen, is perfect. I'm going to go ahead and put this back together and get right back to you. Now would you look at that? Looking good. So you want to make sure these are nice and tight. You don't want air getting through here, because that will change. Obviously, you cause problems with your tuning. And make sure your fuel lines are installed. And what you want to do is when you're ready to start, you're going to hold that tickler down until fuel starts pouring out of it. And you'll make your adjustments from there. Now in my next video, I'm going to show you how to adjust this carburetor. If you're wondering what I was doing with the throttle, this is what I was doing right here. You want to make sure before that slide moves up and down, you have a little bit of play. That also helps you know that the slide is positioned, it's seated all the way down. So you want a little bit of play before it starts to lift. And you really want to hear that sound. That's a good sound, knowing that it's going up and down, up and down. And if you're paying attention, I'm going to be gutting this next. I know it doesn't look like much, but neither did this when I started. And I really appreciate it. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my videos. Obviously, we don't get anything out of it, but it just helps me doing them, knowing that people are watching them, that it's helping somebody. And if you have any additional advice, I'd love to hear it, as I'm learning as well. And that's how I've learned all these different tricks, from obviously people who know more and who have worked on these longer than I have. I really appreciate you hanging out with me tonight. Thank you. See ya.